And welcome back to the special studio audience edition of Hannity. And tonight I am joined by a great outspoken group of African-American conservatives. Now they're here tonight for, among other things, to dispute the ridiculous, insane stereotype that all blacks in this great country of ours are somehow liberal. Far from it. In fact, as we have demonstrated in our last segment, it is not uncommon for many of the men and women that are seated here tonight to be on the receiving end of racially charged attacks simply for standing up for the principles that they believe in. And here to help elaborate on that point and much, much more, our audience of political commentators, reverends, authors, doctors, activists, and much more. By the way, welcome all of you. Thank you for being here. Deneen Borelli, this, in part, we're doing this show was your idea. You said, we've got to expose this. You wrote a book, Blacklash.
Yes.
In that book, you start out and you say, Google my name. I know you well. I Googled your name. I don't like what I see. Right. Tell people what they'd see if they do that.
Well, listen, you're going to see things that I can't even say on your program, but token, traitor, sellout, Aunt Jemima, Uncle Tom. But these are individuals hiding behind their computers instead of debating me on my values and my principles. But I tell you, I wrote Blacklash because I want to expose the failures of the black liberal establishment. And at the top of the list is President Obama. In my opinion, he has a war against black Americans because look at the unemployment rate. Look at the failed high school dropout rates. He is not doing what he should be doing to implement proposals where people should be employed. His energy policy is failing our country. And when you look at it, he had over 90% of black voter support for both elections. And he's just failing our country and especially failing the black community. Let me ask, we now heard from Dr. Carson and Deneen Borelli, a show of hands. How many of you have been called horrible names, as we were talking about earlier? Put your hand up high. Everybody in this room, horrible names. Reverend, why? Why is that happening? And where are the people on the left that claim they will stand up for civil rights, defending the right of African-American conservatives not to be treated this way?
It's designed, Sean, to keep black people in particularly uninformed and broke. And when you put people in that type of situation, you have them uninformed about the freedom that's all around them, then you're able to lead them like sheep down a path that they have led them to
I'm
over
looking, I see a lot of head nodding going on
year period of time.
Yeah.
And when you look at the black community, and you look at this administration being reelected, it was reelected because the electorate was uninformed and they didn't have any money.
Were they well informed? Let me go here. Star Parker, how are you? Good to see you.
Yes, good seeing you too. You know, when we look at who's behind this strategy, the liberal Democrats have not changed their MO. This is not a new strategy. They used it during slavery. Remember, every time the word freedom was mentioned and African Americans at that time heard about freedom, if you ran away, they would bring you back to that plantation, the overseer. The overseer today is the Congressional Black Caucus. Their exclusive job is to keep them on the plantation, keep them uneducated, and keep them unarmed. And this was the same job of the overseer of the slave plantation, which was liberal Democrats. Now, let me finish this one point, because I'm going to tell you what they did. They would take that slave, they would strip the skin off of him, and make everybody watch. And that's what they do to us.
People are going to hear this, and they're going to say, you're going to compare the Congressional Black Caucus to overseers?
It's the same exact strategy, because what they know.
Everyone agrees with that? Crystal, you disagree. I want to ask you why.
I disagree with the constant comparison of black liberals as slave masters and comparing those people, those blacks who choose to be informed and vote for Democrats, as somehow slaves. I think the better way for us to talk about this is what Dr. Carson does, what I do. When you talk about the history of the Republican Party, when you talk about the fact that Lincoln and Republicans from before slavery through to 1964 and beyond with President Nixon, Republicans are the ones who fought for civil rights, who fought for opportunity for blacks, who actually, nobody knows this because they don't know their history. In 1970, when Nixon became president, he was solely responsible, his policies, for making sure the schools were desegregated. So you know what Democrats stand for? Secession, segregation, and slavery. And what we need to be reminding blacks about is that if you're trapped in failing schools, it's because Democrats want you that way. They wanted you that way before we were freed, and they want you trapped in failing schools now. So when we talk about, when I go, all the things Dr. Carson was saying, when I spoke at the Congressional Black Caucus with my good friend Ron Christie about voter IDs, and I said, I want you guys to tell me why blacks can't get IDs but whites can. Kids came up to me afterwards and said, Crystal, you gave me a license to come out of the closet.
You know, can I add one point? Because there is a missing link in terms of history. And nobody, when I bring this up, liberals don't like to hear it. 64 Civil Rights Act, 65 Voting Rights Act. Well, where was Al Gore's father?
Voting against it. Al Gore Sr. voted against it.
Right. But there is this.
Our movie, Sean,
yes, sir.
Runaway Slave movie, deals with all of those points. There would not have been a Civil Rights Act of 1965 if it had not been for Everett Dirksen, a Democrat from Illinois. And many times, so many times, the history of the Republican Party, and one thing Republicans are afraid of doing, is standing up and facing this thing.
You want to know one reason why? The R word. Yes. People do not want to be called, because who would want to be a racist? It's evil.
They're going to call you that anyway. They're going to call you that anyway.
All right, we got to take a break. I feel like a teacher in school. You're raising your hand. All right. We'll come back. We have a great studio audience, and also coming up next on this special edition of Hannity.
Racism is the belief that one race, whites, should rule all others. Get your definition straight.
Oh, really? Now I'm going to ask our studio audience if they agree with that left-wing anchor's assessment as a special edition of Hannity returns straight